Have you ever found yourself copy and pasting a bunch of code in a bunch of different places in your app and ever wished you could make that code more reusable and concise? Well, that's what we're going to be going over how to do in this video by implementing generics in this SwiftUI app example that we have here with this drop-down menu and selection sheet, guys. We have this starter project here that you guys will have access to. The link to download that is in the description. We're going to do a brief run through of everything so that we understand how this works. And then we are going to refactor these components to implement generics to see how much more concise and reusable our code is going to become with the use of generics there. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. And once again, just make sure you download the starter project. The link for that is in the description, and we're going to go ahead and dive into the current setup of the code. So guys, in our content view, I'm going to dive into the view body really quickly. We have these two sort of drop-down menus, right? And we see here that this is the code for the first one, and this is the code for the second one. So just to dive into this, we basically have this placeholder that says select loan type. And when I click this guy, it launches a sheet, which is linked to this sheet configuration. And if we go down here, we have our sheet modifier, which will present a specific sheet based on the item that we select. We have a loan type selection view and a loan frequency selection view. This is obviously the loan type selection view. And if I select one of these items, it will display the selected item there. So if I select auto, it will display the auto item in there. If I go back here and select home, I think you guys get the point there, right? And then in the next one, when we click this, we set the sheet configuration to loan payment frequency. It will then launch the loan frequency selection view. And same thing, right now it has a placeholder because there is no selected item. And if I select an item, it will then display that inside of the dropdown. And the state properties up here are storing our selected loan type or selected loan payment frequency. So really quickly, guys, if we jump into these models, up in the model folder, we have loan type. They're just pretty simple enumerations. So this is our loan type, and we can see here that these are the options that are displayed from this loan type. It conforms to a couple protocols, case iterable and identifiable, and loan payment frequency is essentially the same thing, right? So these are our data models, and back in our content view, we have state properties to track the selected value for them, right? And when the user selects a value, we obviously just display that inside of the dropdown. And our selection views are also pretty straightforward, right? We have a loan type selection view. It's a list, and it just displays all of the options. It loops through all of the enum cases, and we have the description. If the item is selected, we have a check mark, and just some pretty basic navigation titles, presentation detents, and all of that stuff. And when we select an item, it will set that guy here. This is a binding, and it will dismiss the sheet. And the loan frequency selection view is pretty much exactly the same thing. The only thing that differs is the data model. So all of the code is exactly the same. We just have a different data type as our binding. And when we select that, it updates the selected property and dismisses our sheet. So overall, pretty simple, pretty straightforward application, guys. We just have some components that have some selection logic and display a selected property, right? So now what I want us to do is dive into the drawbacks of this current setup that we have. Number one being that we have a lot of copy and pasted code for very similar components. So what do I mean by that? Well, we can see here that the code for this drop-down menu is pretty much exactly the same as the code for this drop-down menu. The only thing that's different is the type of model that we are passing in or want to bind a selection to, right? So the code for this and the code for this are exactly the same. We're just selecting different data types, right? So we have a lot of copy and pasted code there. And as a result of that, we don't have scalable code or code that would behave well at scale. And that is very evident if we were to try to add another drop-down menu, or let's say two more. I would need to copy and paste all of this code just to get another drop-down menu in there and another one in there. And you guys can start to see that this really does not behave well at scale because of how large my file is going to become just to add additional drop-down menus. And like I said before, the code is almost exactly the same. The only thing that differs is the data model that is linked to each drop-down menu, right? So we're going to start this off by creating a reusable drop-down menu, and we're going to see the challenges that come along with it and how generics can help us solve that problem. So let's imagine we want to refactor this code into like a reusable component like our drop-down menu, right? So what I could do is let me just copy and paste this stuff here. And we can go down to the bottom of this file, guys, and create a struct. And we're going to call this our drop-down menu. And it's going to be a view. And we're going to have var body, which is some view, right? And paste that stuff in there. And we're actually not going to implement the sheet configuration selection here. So let's just do the view. So let's just go ahead and grab everything that is inside of the view or the label closure and paste that in there. So we'll see here that we need some sort of selection like data type, right? And we're also going to need to pass a placeholder in as well. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. We're going to say let placeholder, which is a string, and then we're going to say let selection. And that can be some sort of optional string, right? So here we're going to say if let selection, and we'll just say text selection, and we'll replace this with placeholder. And now this is a pretty reusable component, right? So guys, we can go back up to our code here, and let's see if we can replace this code that was inside of our label body with our drop-down menu. Placeholder is going to be select loan type. And this will be our selected loan type dot description. So now if I go here and select auto, we'll notice that that works beautifully, right? So next up, I can also replace this with my drop-down menu, and placeholder will be select loan frequency, and my selection will be my selected loan payment frequency dot description. Let me highlight this and hit Control M. Highlight this and hit Control M. And now we can see that our code is significantly more reusable and concise, right? We haven't implemented generics yet. We're going to do that in a second. This configuration definitely works, but I do want to show you guys how to implement generics to link this more closely to our data models instead of just a string. But before we do that, I want us to just take a quick pause here and notice how much more scalable and concise our code has become. If I want to add an additional drop-down menu, I would just need to copy and paste 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code instead of the previous like 20 or 30 lines of code, right? So this is a lot more flexible and a lot more reusable. So next up, guys, we're going to go over how to implement a generic inside of our drop-down menu instead of just using a simple string for the display value. And we're going to see that this is going to provide several benefits that enhance code flexibility, type safety, and reusability. So I'm going to go over how to do it, and then we will come back and discuss all of the benefits that we gain from this. So in our drop-down menu, we are going to define some sort of generic here. It's going to be selection, and this can conform to the custom string convertible protocol. So this protocol just forces us to implement some sort of description value, and we're going to see how this comes in just a second. So guys, instead of passing just a string along, we are going to pass along this generic selection property as our selection value. And here we're going to say if let selection, we want to display selection.description. So next up, what we're going to do is we are going to remove this .description guy here, and we are just going to pass along the actual data type that represents our selection, instead of the string that is linked to that display value. So now, guys, you're going to notice that generic struct dropdown menu requires that loan type conform to custom string convertible, right? So all we have to do is go into our loan type object or enum and just conform to that protocol. And we are already implementing this description property, so we're good to go there. And before we continue with the rest of this video, guys, make sure you check out the website at stephancodes.com if you are serious about taking your iOS development skills to the next level. We have a bunch of amazing courses that teach you guys how to build real-world applications with our pro app clones. We also have a bunch of incredible fundamentals courses as well. If you guys want more practice with generics, you can check out the intermediate and advanced fundamentals with Swift course. or any of these to enhance your foundation as a Swift developer, guys. And my favorite is our newest tier of courses, which is the Pro Plus apps that teach you guys how to build production-ready mobile applications that can handle millions of users, led by myself, an ex-Meta engineer. So make sure you guys check this stuff out. You can also get unlimited access to all of our pro content with becoming a member. So for just a low cost of $40 a month, you guys can get access to thousands of dollars worth of material. So guys, if you're serious about taking your skills as an iOS developer to the next level, whether you're trying to get a job or you are trying to launch an app to the App Store and you want to build a quality app, make sure you check us out at stephancodes.com. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back to the video now. And if we go back and do the same thing for loan payment frequency, custom string convertible, we already have our description property implemented. You guys are going to notice that our errors now go away and that our code is going to work all the same. So I select auto, or select another value here, and it's good to go. Okay, so you guys might be wondering like, okay, dude, it still works the same way it did before. What's the benefit of using generics? And like this stuff can be a little intimidating and it's kind of like, it seems complex, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually really simple. So just to do a quick breakdown, guys, we are now passing along an abstraction or some sort of protocol type that represents our selection. It just has to conform to this protocol. So we're going to go over all of the benefits with this implementation, just going over how it works really quickly one more time. So our selection property is now no longer just a string. It is going to be of our generic type, which is anything that conforms to the custom string convertible protocol. And then when we want to display the text, we just utilize the dot description guy that we get by conforming to this protocol. So if you look into this protocol by command clicking into it, it just has this simple var description, right? Which is a string. So it makes anything that conforms to this protocol describable, right? So that you can like represent something with some sort of string value. So that's all we're doing. And let's go over the benefits of this now before we jump into making our selection views generic as well. So guys, number one is type safety. So by using generics, we ensure that the drop-down menu works with any data type while maintaining type constraints. So it's not just linked to a random string value anymore. We have type safety now, which prevents runtime errors caused by using invalid data. As the compiler is now going to enforce type correctness, right? So our code is more type safe. Next up, reusability. So a generic drop-down menu can now handle various data types, right? So we can pass along any sort of data type or object. It could be a struct, it could be an enum, it could be a class. It just has to conform to that custom string convertible protocol. So we're not coupled to a string type anymore. We are now coupled to like a protocol abstraction, which is a lot more flexible. Another one is separation of concerns, guys. So using this generic keeps the drop-down menu logic independent of specific types, adhering to a single responsibility principle from the solid architecture. So the drop-down's job is simply to display a selection. It doesn't need to know about specific domain types like loan type or loan payment frequency. So this reduces overall coupling and makes it easier to test and maintain. So that's just some of the benefits of using generics here, guys. We overall have much more flexible, much more type-safe code. And next up, to finish this video, I want us to completely refactor our selection views as well, because we have, once again, a lot of copy and pasted code here to represent each one of these selection views. And the only thing that's different is the binding that we pass along. So we are going to be using generics here as well to create a single reusable selection view that can just take in some sort of generic data type. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here. It's going to be a SwiftUI view, and we're going to call this selection sheet. And what I want us to do is go and just grab all of this code here, go to our selection sheet and paste it in there. And we're going to figure out how to use a generic here to decouple our code from this specific data type here, right? So really quickly, guys, let's get rid of our preview and let's start diving into these errors. So the first one that is going to be the easiest to fix is cannot find dismiss in scope, right? Anytime I select one of these options, I want to dismiss this sheet. So let's go ahead and just paste this in here. Environment, dismiss, the dismissal property so that we can actually call this dismissal function. All right, next up, this is the tough part. So we notice that we need to get some sort of selection property in here. And guys, to do that, we are going to go up to our struct name here and add our generic brackets, and we can say like S. You could call it selection S, T, it doesn't really matter. And let's go ahead and make it so that S has to conform to that custom string convertible protocol again. And we're going to create a binding here because we need that for our selection functionality. We're going to say selection, and it's going to be of that optional type S. And here, instead of selected loan type, we are going to just replace this with selection, right? So that error is going to go away. So we ultimately still have two major problems with this current configuration. One, we have not decoupled our list from this concrete type of this loan type. We want some sort of generic abstraction there. And we also need to deal with this logic here with checking to see if the selection value is equal to the type we're looking at to ultimately display a check mark for the selected item. We're going to come back to this, so let's just comment this out for now. And let's figure out how we can decouple our list from this concrete type here. So guys, I want to be able to pass in some array of items and ultimately loop through that to display whatever set of items needs to be on this selection sheet. So we could do this here. We could say we're also going to be passing in some items, and it's going to be of my generic type S. And here I'm going to say for each items, and we could say item in now, and we could say selection equals our item. And let's see what happens there. Okay, so we are going to need to conform to one, the identifiable protocol. And to do that, we could just add that protocol conformance to our generic type. So I could go up here and I could say, and make sure this is identifiable as well. And let's see what happens there. Okay, you'll notice that we need to replace this with item as well. And I believe we should be good to go now, right? So let's go ahead and see if we can now reuse this selection sheet for both of our drop-down menus so that we don't have to have a bunch of copy and pasted code for each selection view. So if I go back to my content view, guys, you notice that for each one of those drop-downs, I had to have its own like individual selection view. And that once again isn't scalable, right? Because for every time I created a new dropdown, I have to create a new selection view, and the code for that is largely the same. So now what I'm going to do here is just pass in my selection sheet. Selection is going to be, let's see, my selected loan type. And the items just has to conform to custom string convertible and identifiable. So we're going to say that this is going to be our loan type dot all cases. And we notice we're good to go there, right? And we could do the same thing here. And this is just going to be a different selection property, selected loan payment frequency. And this is going to be loan payment frequency dot all cases. Let me clean this up with Control M. And let's see what happens here, guys. If I go and I select auto, boom, it's working beautifully, right? So now look at what we just accomplished. We now have a single reusable component that implements generics so that we can handle the selection of each data type in a much more flexible and concise way. So now every time I create a new drop-down menu, I can just reuse this selection sheet to handle the selection for that particular item. So I could literally go and now delete these two things, guys. Let's just go ahead and delete those all together. Move to trash. We don't need them anymore because our code is boss as shit now. And next up, we just need to make sure that we're also handling that little checkmark selection there. So guys, if I go back here, let's go ahead and bring this back in. Let's comment this back in. And we're going to say if selection is equal to that particular item, then we display a check mark, right? And I believe that should be good to go. Okay, yeah. So there's one more protocol that we need to conform to, which is the equatable protocol. So guys, if I go up here and just say equatable, we should notice that that goes away, and we can go back to our code and go to our preview. Let's run that. And we can go here and boom, we see our check mark showing up there beautifully, guys. So how does that work? Well, back in our selection sheet, we just need to make sure that this generic here conforms to all the necessary protocols that allow us to implement the functionality that we need to. So this makes our code significantly more flexible and reusable, and it's sort of an abstraction now. So back in our content view, guys, we pass along the selection as our selected loan type. And if we go into that enum, it conforms to all of those protocols. So it matches up with what we need and we're good to go, right? So a more concise way of accomplishing this is to create a custom protocol or a type alias, guys, that conforms to all of these things. So this isn't as messy. So what we could do here is potentially say like type alias selectable equals, and you guys will notice that my autocomplete in Xcode 16 just handles all of that for me. We go here and we could replace that with selectable just to make our code more concise. And then I could also go into my data types and just say, hey, guess what? This is some selectable thing. And go here and say that this is some selectable thing. And you could have made selectable a protocol. You can make it a type alias. It doesn't really matter. Let's see. No, remember all cases. Oh, guess what? It needs to be case iterable as well. That's my bad. So back in our selection sheet, we could say and case iterable, right? So guys, if we try to build our code, we should notice that that's good to go. Yeah, awesome, man. So guys, that shows you just how helpful generics can be in making your code more reusable and more concise. We notice here that our code in our content view is significantly more concise, and it's a lot easier for us to scale efficiently, right? Like if I want to create an additional drop-down menu, it's just copy and pasting that much code. And I also don't have to create an additional selection sheet to go along with that. I have this reusable selection sheet that implements generics there as well. And there you have it, guys. By introducing generics into our project, we made our code more flexible, reusable, and type safe. Overall, ready to handle any data type with ease. So whether you're building simple apps or scaling up to something more complex, leveraging generics is a powerful way to keep your code clean, type safe, and future-proof. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. As always, if you guys have any questions or ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching this one, guys. Peace out. Until next time.